Now, as part of its attempts to crack down on crime in London, the Metropolitan Police is set to install the UK's first permanent facial recognition cameras in Croydon in South London. They will capture the faces of people on the street in order to help catch alleged criminals by matching them with images they have in their database. And the data will be immediately deleted if there is no match. Now, if the project is successful, the Met hope to extend the cameras to the whole of the capital and perhaps, after that, the rest of the country. So, is this a good way to get criminals off our streets, or is it an attack on our civil liberties? Well, to tell us more is the Senior Advocacy Officer at Big Brother Watch, Madeleine Stone. Madeleine, welcome to the show. A pleasure to have your company. Now, the Met will no doubt say this is a necessary act to clamp down on spiralling crime. Croydon has twice been named the dubious honour of the murder capital of London for knife crime, spiralling drug crime, and this technology has been used to apprehend and arrest rapists and wanted criminals. Is it a good idea or a step too far?
Well, of course, everybody wants to get on top of crime in London, and the police really need to be getting the basics right, I think, before investing huge amounts of money, papering over the cracks of a broken system with a technology that is catastrophic for our civil liberties, for our right to privacy. It basically turns the population of London into walking barcodes. You know, you walk down the street where you work, you socialise, you go out to eat, you go for shopping, and up on every street corner could be, and will be certainly in Croydon, biometric police surveillance that's conducting an ID check. I mean, this is extraordinary. It's the sort of thing we see in China and in Russia, certainly not in democratic, rights-respecting nations like the UK.
Now, Madeleine, people would respond to that by saying, well, the police claim, at least, that the data isn't stored. It's matched in real time via AI to known perpetrators, wanted felons, and police officers will be on the streets at the time the cameras are switched on to apprehend those people in real life, real time. It won't log or store the details of those who aren't known to the police. So does that get around your concerns about capturing people's images if they're not a wanted criminal?
What it does is it scans the faces of every single person who walks in front of a camera. It makes a biometric map of their face and compares them against a police watch list. It is, in reality, no different to the police asking for a fingerprint scan or an ID check of every single person who walks past them. And that's just simply not how we do policing in the UK. We police by consent. You are innocent until proven guilty. What facial recognition does is it reverses that principle. It turns us into a nation of suspects, essentially, that need a police identity check in order to be allowed to carry on about our day. So it's a real seismic shift in how we go about policing here in the UK. And I think the fact that this is being done without any legal protections, there's no law on this. It's never been properly debated in Parliament. You know, the police are really operating in a legal vacuum here. And for such an extraordinary technology that has such profound implications for our rights, it's absolutely unacceptable to be expanding this technology across London, also in Cardiff as well. We've seen it being used in this way without any proper legal safeguards or legislation. It's the police are really being let off the leash with this, and you know the government need to urgently get this under control.
Madeleine, can I say, I've lived in London for 30 years. I've known Croydon for the vast majority of that. Croydon used to be a fairly dreary place. It was somewhere where you went to live if you couldn't afford to live in London or wanted to live a bit further out. It was a commute about. Crime was next to non-existent, apart from a few punch-ups on a Saturday night, like most suburbs of Britain. But Croydon has radically changed. It's culturally changed. It's a violent place. It's an unsafe place. As I said, murder capital of London, 2 years on the trot. I used to have your opinion. I have to say, I've changed my opinion in 30 years of living in London. I've had to explain to my children so many times about flowers tied around lampposts, dead bodies, you know, in suburbs that never knew anything to do with this kind of crime. London has changed. The people don't play by the rules. These criminals don't care about law and order. On that basis, is there a case to be made? If they won't respect the rules that exist, we should change the rules to nab these scumbags.
Look, I absolutely get it. I've lived in South London for 30 years as well. And I think everyone can agree that policing in London is broken. They're not responding to 999 calls, they're not investigating crimes. But it's absolutely not an either or situation where the only solution has to be reaching for this dystopian, frankly, Orwellian technology. It's not an either or. There are other things available to police forces that they should be doing long before they start reaching for some of the most authoritarian surveillance tools that we've seen, and as I've said, other democratic countries do their policing without this kind of technology. The kind of countries that we're following in the footsteps of are places like Russia and China. And I don't think, as much as we want to fight crime, there are other ways that don't involve violating the rights and civil liberties of everyone in London.
So, Madeleine, Chris Philp, who's the Conservative MP for Croydon South, the area where the cameras will be installed, also as the Shadow Home Secretary, of course, he said this: those people opposing this technology, they need to explain why they don't want those wanted criminals to be arrested, including rapists. What would you say to that?
I mean, as I've said, this is not the only solution. Of course, we all want violent criminals off the street. And frankly, Chris Philp, when he was policing minister, oversaw the kind of collapse of policing in London, some of the worst kind of figures we've seen. We've seen, police not turning up to crimes, as I've said. Reaching for these kinds of shiny sticking plasters are not getting to the heart of the real problems with policing and the real reasons that these crimes have spiralled in London. It's a much more difficult problem than just sticking AI and a camera on it. And of course, I should say as well that this technology can and does go wrong, as we've seen with things like the Horizon post office scandal. When you outsource really important, serious public sector jobs like policing to an algorithm, it can make mistakes, it does make mistakes, and lives can be ruined as a consequence. In fact, we're actually supporting a legal challenge, a guy called Sean Thompson, who volunteered on the streets of London, anti-knife crime worker, working to get young people directed away from crime and getting knife off the streets. He was misidentified as a criminal by the Met's facial recognition technology. He was surrounded by a handful of officers. He wasn't allowed to go until he could do this sort of perverse thing of proving that he wasn't who the camera said he was. That's very, very difficult to do. And this is the danger when you get AI embedded into these really sensitive and important jobs, is that, AI is frankly a blunt tool. And when it goes wrong, very, very hard to unpick that. And, that's, of course, we think this is wrong in terms of the way it violates everyone's privacy, but it can, spectacularly backfire for individuals. And I've seen it happen, sadly, countless times in London, people being wrongly flagged as criminals and having to try and prove their innocence, even children. So this isn't, a kind of magical bullet for the problems we're having with policing. It's going to cause a lot more problems.
Madeleine Stone, excellent conversation. Thank you very, very much for joining us. Beautiful stuff. That really, really is fascinating. That's the Senior Advocacy Officer at Big Brother Watch, Madeleine Stone. Thank you very, very much. What do you make of that? I'm torn on this topic, but I just want scumbags off the streets.